When Publius Quintilius Varus led his legions into an ambush by Germanic tribesmen deep in the Teutoburg forest, he could hardly have imagined that his defeat would prove to be a hinge point for Roman history that has shaped the very contours of European life, culture, and politics for millennia. For after the loss of his 3 legions to a loose confederation of tribes assembled by the chieftain Arminius, Rome was forced to abandon Virgil's dream of an empire without limit, and instead identify defensible borders. The fact that these boundaries were now determined more by nature than the bravery and skill of the legions was a stunning reminder that Rome was mortal and could not assume victory was inevitable on every front. As such, the foolishness of Varus earned him a place in Roman infamy, with Augustus himself forever shaken by the defeat, according to Suetonius, and shouting out, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions," in moments of despair for years afterward. But the fortunes of the crafty Arminius could hardly have been any different. Though his subsequent campaigns against the Romans were far less successful, and he ultimately died at the hands of jealous German rivals, the blow he had dealt in the Teutoburg forest preserved Germany's independence and its distinct culture. Thus, it is little surprise that his memory was later resurrected as a symbol of the German people, and he became a celebrated figure among German nationalists, as those seeking political unity and the creation of a German nation-state in the 19th century sought out past heroes that all Germans could rally around. The celebration of Arminius in Germany unsurprisingly reached its zenith during the Nazi era, as his memory was corrupted from a freedom fighter to a symbol of uniquely Germanic resistance to foreign influences. Hitler would even call Arminius the first architect of our liberty. The close identification of Arminius with Nazi propaganda resulted in hesitance to re-embrace the man and his legacy in the post-World War II era. But in recent years, the far right has tragically become more ascendant in Germany, with the neo-Nazi Alternative for Germany party advocating policies remarkably akin to those of the Third Reich, albeit with new jargon. Arminius is once again repurposed for these malignant and hate-filled efforts, with modern German far-right figures praising him for defending Germany against the influence of the racially diverse, sexually permissive, and apparently woke Roman Empire. This is, of course, deeply ahistorical, and even more deeply immoral. But the specific language that these figures use to paint Rome as non-white, pro-LGBTQ, and other conservative bête noire highlight how the entire far right approaches history in an incoherent manner that relies on cherry-picking specific anecdotes and episodes to create a supposedly idealized version of the past that we must return to. For outside of Germany, the Roman Empire is embraced by the fascists of the far right as an example of European domination of the world and a haven for the straight white men that are apparently persecuted today. This dates back to the dawn of fascism itself, with Mussolini openly pining to return Italy to its Roman glory, and the very term fascism even tracing its origin to the fasces that were carried by the lictors of Roman magistrates. Even now, as fascism again rears its ugly head in Italy, proponents of this vile ideology assert a connection to the ancient Romans, while the pro-Roman fascist reading of history is just as ill-informed as the anti-Roman position of the German right to which it is directly opposed. Fascists tolerate and even embrace this doublethink, because to them, Rome, like all of history, is simply a canvas for myth-making and not the pursuit of actual historical fact. Simply put, fascists aren't concerned with historical accuracy, and they never have been. The actual past is too complex for the simplistic black and white narratives that they rely on to mislead and misinform. To get around this, they create a mythologized version of the past that glorifies a pure, bygone era of national greatness, which then serves as a justification for their own agenda. The actual era in question is never defined, because it, too, must remain elastic enough for the fascists to evade any specific questions. They seek to create a feeling about history, not an informed opinion. This focus on the past also discourages critical thinking about the present. This is clear in their use of selective memory to arbitrarily select certain historical events that support their narrative and conveniently forget those that contradict it. Arminius was embraced by German fascists because their incomplete historical portraits typically focus on periods of national struggle or conflict to cultivate a sense of national victimhood at one moment and a sense of superiority in another. This contradiction dovetails seamlessly into their core ideological position that their enemies are both nigh omnipotent, but also inconceivably weak. The fascist impulse to manipulate the public understanding of Rome, and indeed of all history, is in keeping with the movement's roots in anti-intellectualism and their inherent distrust of critical thought. Serious reflection is a hurdle to the blind obedience they favor and an impediment to the glorification of action and violence. Because fascism is so fundamentally incoherent and is such a recent phenomenon in the history of political thought, its advocates seek to anchor themselves to tradition to deal with the shortcomings of their ideas. As such, identifying their political project with the deep history of Rome is natural, but Rome also serves their purposes because the fragmented nature of evidence for Roman life and thought presents a ripe opportunity for the manipulation of history and the cherry-picking that they excel at. Rome existed for over 1,000 years and across 3 continents before collapsing in the West, and included so many distinct strains of political thought and cultural practices that support for nearly any idea can be inferred at some point or another. This ambiguity allows for the construction of private mental Romes that bear little resemblance not just to actual historical reality, but even to the private mental constructions of others. Rome becomes all things to all men. If you're enjoying this video, please do us a favor by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We're a small channel, and this is the only way to get the almighty YouTube algorithm to notice us. Furthermore, you can help Tribunate become more sustainable by becoming a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Thank you for all of your support. The common portrait that they most often land on is of an idealized Rome, one that emphasizes order, hierarchy, unity, and a mythical past greatness, willfully deluding themselves into the creation of a conception that they hope will legitimize oppression by presenting it as a natural continuation of a supposedly glorious past. But a further layer of fiction is also added to this already imaginary past when men, and it typically is only men, are told that in the classical world they would have been powerful kings or conquering generals, ignoring the realities of Roman social structure, but at the same time making the vulnerable and impressionable feel that something was stolen from them that they never actually possessed. This manufactured narrative discourages critical examination and intentionally ignores the very real divides within Roman society, so that the magnificence of Rome can be channeled to uphold the present class structure, erasing modern injustice in the same way that it ignores the very real inequalities that underpinned Roman society. Fascists know that they don't actually like or even respect history, but they want you to think they do, because they know their vision offers nothing for the present and even less for the future. It is no accident that ground zero for the ahistorical fascist infatuation with Rome is the website formerly known as Twitter, which under the ownership of the far-right enabler Elon Musk has seen a marked rise in all forms of bigotry, including racism and transphobia. By its very nature, Twitter prioritizes short, attention-grabbing content, so that even the well-meaning historian must reduce complexities to easily digestible snippets. In the hands of bad faith actors, though, it is easy to harness the format to create fascist dog whistles that on the surface seem only to glorify past Roman figures, but carry secondary meanings to their far-right audience that encourage military conquest or carry bigoted undertones. These crass, pseudo-historical memes are misinformed and harmful, but their success is driven by the fact that they are tapping into something that is real. Western powers once made intentional and conscious references and allusions to ancient Greece and Rome to justify international colonialism and conquest. Nearly every empire since the fall of Rome has claimed that it is Rome's true successor, and harnessed the credentials of Rome to undergird its system of exploitation and oppression. This has faded to some degree in recent decades as the values of the classical world are increasingly viewed as fundamentally incompatible with our own. So we must understand that the fascists aren't really reacting to the supposed loss of traditional values or virtues, for no modern person can really claim any affinity to the societies of Greece or Rome that have been extinct for thousands of years. They are as permanently severed from this past as all of us, and their reaction is instead one of anger driven by the decline in fawning admiration for Rome and the role this played in supporting injustice. One of the primary reasons for the more critical view of Rome that has emerged in recent decades is increasing diversity within the field of classical studies and across high-level academia as a whole. New perspectives have moved debates into exciting new areas and transformed the historian from a stenographer that passively records facts to a researcher that is combining critical thinking and imagination to truly understand thought processes and motivations behind past actions. By wrestling with ancient thoughts, the historian gains a deeper understanding of the past and how it came to be. This process is not simply about retrieving objective facts, but about interpreting and making sense of the available evidence through the lens of human thought. But the study of ideas is also balanced with interpretation of history grounded in the analysis of material conditions and the struggle between social classes over the means of production. This more nuanced methodology breaks up the myths that fascists rely on by exposing the human motivations and flaws at the heart of each supposed great man in history and reorients our focus towards the marginalized masses to create a complete picture of the past. But even more importantly, there is an increasing recognition that it is impossible to locate the objective, idealized past that fascism seeks to impose. The study of history is a dialogue between the past and present because modern forces inevitably shape how we interpret the past, and so a truly neutral understanding of the past is impossible. History is inherently political, and the historian's own class position and societal context will inevitably influence their interpretation of the past. Acknowledging these shades of gray is critical for competent historical research, but fatal to the fascist vision of an idealized monolithic past. So despite recent gains by the far right, there is cause for optimism because their own political project is so incoherent that by its very nature it cannot remain focused for long before inevitably breaking down. But we should not rely on their own inexorable self-implosion to win the battle for us, because every day that these cancerous narratives permeate our discourse, real harm is done. Those on the left, or indeed anyone with a bare shred of human dignity and compassion, has already been conscripted into the fight. History is central to the fascist self-conception because ultimately they believe that death is stronger than life, meaning that those long dead make the perfect standard-bearers. For this reason, they seek to keep the past where it is, a static and unchanging dreary world filled with ghosts. But the past is alive because we are alive, and the fundamental forces that shape the human experience remain unchanged. We all seek love, community, and freedom, even if we no longer pray to Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Similarly, we all must grapple with our place in the economic order and even the wider universe, while eventually coming to terms with the deaths of our loved ones and finally of ourselves. The language that you use to describe this journey is different from the ancient Roman, as are the religious, cultural, and moral values that shape how you perceive each of these phenomena. But the fact that you still confront the same struggles can help us tap into the minds of the Romans, if only faintly. They struggled, they died, and we are all that remains of them. Fortunately, the boundaries of human liberation have progressed greatly in recent history, but there is still so much work to be done. We honor the past not by accepting it uncritically and using tradition to continue oppressive social structures, but when we learn from past mistakes to create a more just and equitable society. This dream is something that you and I may never live to see, but for those of us who believe that life is stronger than death, it can perhaps give some small meaning to the untold sufferings of millions upon millions during the classical past. We owe it to them, to those who have no names and no voices, to triumph in the only real fight against the only real enemy, to show that life is stronger than death.